All right, seventh grade. Welcome. We are jumping into lesson 3 today. So we're still focusing on kindness contagion, but this time our focus is going to be on the argument. How strong is it and does it make sense? Before we do that, we have an entrance ticket for today, and that entrance ticket asks us, in reading and analyzing kindness contagion for central ideas and argument, what did you notice about the relationship between the central ideas and main claim? And what would be the advantage of talking about ideas sometimes as central ideas and sometimes as a main claim? So what I need you to do is think about them separately. Okay. All right. And you guys are going to go ahead and pause the video, begin to work on this. When you're finished, work with your elbow partner to discuss your answers, and then come back to me and I'll kind of go over like a model answer for you. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so now that you're back to me, so I'm going to give you a model answer, okay? So you might have said something like the central ideas and the main claim in the article, kindness contagion, were sometimes the same, but not always. The advantage of talking about ideas in different ways is that we can either look at them as central ideas the author develops or as main claims the author is trying to argue for. If we look at them as main claims, then we can more closely examine the evidence and reasoning to see if we agree with the argument the author is making. All right, guys, so hopefully you see the difference there. Let's go ahead and let's look at our learning targets for today. So we have 4. So the first one, I can evaluate whether evidence is relevant and sufficient to support the argument. I can evaluate whether the reasoning is sound. I can evaluate the strength of an argument, and I can acknowledge new information expressed by others, and when warranted, modify my own views. I have a few new terms that I want you guys to add to your vocabulary logs today. Relevant, sufficient, and sound. So please go ahead and pause the video and work to add these to your vocab log now. Come back to me when you're ready to move forward. All right, guys, so we're going to jump into evaluating the argument today. So this is the main focus of our lesson today. So what needs to happen first is that a reread needs to happen. I know you guys are probably so sick of this, but I'm sorry, it does need to happen because this time we're analyzing it for something else, right? So this time we are specifically looking at the argument, okay? We are specifically looking at the argument. So let's go ahead and get that reread done now. And have some discussion when you're finished about the argument in particular. And let's go back to those questions. Let me remind you of how strong is it and does it make sense? Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and let's work through rereading it now. Come back to me when you're finished. All right, guys, so this time we're going to go back to this note catcher, argument, kindness, contagion, and we're going to see those red circles. That is what we're working on filling in today, okay? So you're being asked point 1 and point 2, and the reasoning, is the evidence relevant, yes or no? Is the evidence sufficient? Yes or no? And you need to be prepared to argue this. So be prepared to argue your point, okay? So I want you to work in pairs to do this. So you and your elbow partner are going to talk through this and work through this. Your teacher should be circulating the room. Once you're finished, come back to me and I've got a few questions that I want you guys to discuss as a class, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and pause the video and work through this now. All right, guys, so now that you're finished, let's go ahead and look at the main claim again. So kindness is contagious and kindness can take on new forms as it spreads. So what are the main points that the author uses to support this claim? So I either want you to turn and talk or you guys can have a whole class discussion about that, and that's completely up to your teacher. So go ahead and pause the video and talk through this now, and then come back to me when you're ready to move on. All right, guys, so we're moving on. Let's answer these questions. What does it mean to say that the evidence is relevant? And what does it mean to say that the evidence is sufficient? Is the evidence that you guys identified for the first point relevant? Why or why not? And remember, if we need a reminder, we've got these terms here, the definition of relevant and the definition of sufficient. Again, these questions, you can think, pair, share, you can turn and talk, or you can do this as a whole class. That's up to your teacher. Go ahead and pause the video and work through these now. All right, guys, and lastly, before we move forward, is the evidence that we identified for the first point sufficient? Why or why not? Is the reasoning we identified for this evidence and point sound? Why or why not? So I want you guys to go ahead and work through this now. Again, think, pair, share, or as a whole class. That's up to your teacher. Go ahead and pause the video, and you can come back to me when you are finished. All right, guys, so we're going to move on and we're going to work together to evaluate evidence and reasoning for point 2. So you guys might have already did this in your work, but now I want you guys in your pairs to talk to another group of pairs. So identify and discuss the point, evidence, and reasoning. Is it related? Is there enough evidence? And does it make sense? Okay. If you did not work through point 2 already, go ahead and with your pair or your partner, your elbow partner, work through point 2. So that's up to your teacher to determine where you guys are in that work. If you finish point 2, again, one pair of pairs pairs up with another pair of pairs. That's a lot to say, right, guys? And work through these questions together, okay? And then we're going to come back together and we're going to have one last final big discussion, and I'm going to leave you with some questions to ponder before we exit, okay? So go ahead and let's begin this work now. Your teacher will be circulating the room and can help you and answer any questions. Go ahead and pause the video and come back to me when you're finished. All right, guys, so now we're going to discuss as a whole class. This is our closing, right? So we're going to evaluate this argument. You guys know this bothers me when they do this. So how valid is the overall argument in kindness contagion? So I want you guys to pause the video and I want you to have a whole class discussion about this. You should have plenty of evidence and reasoning to back up your support. So go ahead and pause the video and come back to me for one more thing before we close out. All right, guys, so I'm going to leave these questions up here and I'm going to go ahead and sign off, but your teacher can work through these questions with you. And these are going to generate some good discussion amongst you guys. So whole class, just work through some of these before class is finished today. I'm going to go ahead and leave now, but your teacher can pause here and leave this up on the board. And I'll see you guys very soon with lesson 4.